The journey of Moses, from prince to prophet. In ancient Egypt, where towering monuments gleamed in the golden sun and the scent of incense filled the air, a most unusual prince lived among the Egyptian elite. Moses, born to Hebrew parents but raised as an Egyptian royal, carried a secret that would eventually change the course of history. He had been rescued from the Nile River as a baby, placed in a basket by his mother to protect him from the Egyptian king's decree to drown all Hebrew male infants. The pharaoh's daughter found Moses and raised him as her own son, granting him the privileges of Egyptian royalty. But despite his lavish life, Moses always knew he was different. His true identity as a Hebrew, one of the enslaved people, hung over him like a shadow. Moses spent his early years in the palace, learning the ways of Egypt. He was educated in their wisdom, languages, and culture. He wore fine clothes and dined with royalty. Yet, beneath the comfort of royal life, Moses could not escape the suffering of his people. Every day, he saw the harsh treatment of the Hebrew slaves. He watched as they labored under the scorching sun, their backs bent under the weight of building Egypt's grand structures. The cries of pain from his people echoed in his ears, and the crack of the overseer's whip haunted him. Despite his elevated status, Moses could not ignore the injustice around him. One day, Moses witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave mercilessly. His heart burned with anger at the injustice, and in a moment of fury, he struck down the Egyptian, killing him. Realizing the consequences of his actions, Moses fled Egypt to escape the pharaoh's wrath. He left behind the life of luxury he had known and retreated into the wilderness of Midian. In Midian, Moses spent many years in quiet exile, tending sheep and starting a family. His life seemed to have settled into peaceful obscurity. But God had other plans for him. One day, while tending to his flock on the side of a mountain, Moses encountered something miraculous: a bush that burned with fire, yet was not consumed by the flames. As Moses approached, a voice called out to him from the bush, "Moses, Moses." It was the voice of God, and he had a mission for Moses. God told Moses to return to Egypt, to confront Pharaoh, and to demand the release of the Hebrew people. Moses was hesitant. He felt inadequate for such a monumental task. How could he, a fugitive and a simple shepherd, confront the mighty Pharaoh? He questioned his ability to speak to the king and doubted whether the Hebrews would believe he was truly sent by God. But God reassured him, offering signs and empowering Moses with the ability to perform miracles. God also told Moses that his brother Aaron would accompany him to help him speak. Moses, though still reluctant, returned to Egypt. He went to the Israelites first and told them that God had sent him to free them from their bondage. The Hebrews believed and were filled with hope. But when Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh, demanding the release of the Israelites, Pharaoh refused. In his pride, he rejected Moses' plea, and his heart grew harder. It was then that the plagues began, a series of divine punishments that would ravage Egypt. The Nile turned to blood, frogs swarmed the land, and locusts devoured crops. The sky darkened, and disease struck the Egyptian people. But Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he refused to let the Hebrews go. Finally, the last and most devastating plague struck Egypt: the death of the firstborn sons. As the angel of death passed over the homes of the Egyptians, it spared the Hebrew homes marked with lamb's blood on the doorposts, a sign of their faith in God's protection. This final plague broke Pharaoh's will, and he reluctantly agreed to let the Hebrews leave Egypt. The Israelites fled, their hearts filled with a mix of fear and hope, but their journey was far from over. As they journeyed into the desert, Pharaoh had a change of heart. He chased after them with his army, determined to bring them back. But God intervened in a miraculous way. As the Israelites reached the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in, Moses stretched out his hand, and the waters of the sea parted, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. When Pharaoh's army pursued, the waters returned, drowning the soldiers and securing the Israelites' freedom. The journey didn't end with their escape from Egypt. Moses led the Hebrews through the vast, unforgiving wilderness for 40 long years. The desert was harsh, food and water were scarce, and the people often grumbled, longing for the comforts of Egypt. But through every hardship, Moses guided them, teaching them to trust in God's provision. The wilderness was not just a physical trial, it was a spiritual one. The Hebrews' faith in God was tested over and over again. They learned to rely on God for everything, and through this struggle, they developed a deep and abiding belief that they were God's chosen people. It was during this time in the wilderness that Moses received the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai. These laws would become the foundation of their faith and the basis for their moral and social conduct. God's covenant with the Hebrews was solidified, and Moses became not just their leader, but their prophet, guiding them in both spiritual and practical matters. Moses led the Israelites to the borders of the Promised Land, Canaan, but he did not enter it himself. Before his death, he entrusted the leadership to Joshua, who would lead the people into their new home. Moses' life was a journey of transformation, from a prince in Egypt to a prophet of God, from a man living in the comforts of royal life to a humble servant of God leading a nation. His story is a testament to the power of faith, resilience, and obedience to God's will. Moses' legacy would endure through the ages. The faith and laws that he imparted to the Hebrew people would shape their identity and sustain them through centuries of trials and exile. His journey is not just the story of a man, but the story of a people, a journey of liberation, faith, and divine purpose that continues to inspire generations. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories from World History Marathon.